Hi, it's Reverend Brown again, and I'd like to talk to you about another of those means by which God has opened for us so that we can relate to and connect with God and grow more deeply in our faith. Last time I talked to you about prayer. Today I'd like to talk to you about reading the Bible, reading Scripture, and reading books which pull us into a holy sense of living. I have often in my life wanted to be one of those persons who reads through the Bible in a whole year. And I've got the 1 year Bible, or I've got the plan, and I have to tell you, I'm horrible at it. Life gets busy, and sometimes I forget. And it's not intentional, it just happens because I'm a human person too. And then sometimes I get into portions of the Bible, usually the Old Testament, that are kind of boring. The begats, the building of the temple, the building of the ark, all these things, I'm just not excited by them. And I skim them rather than read them. But I do believe that reading the biblical text, reading the Bible, is important. Sometimes we say that when we read the Bible, we don't understand. If that's the case for you, then I would suggest you getting a very modern translation of Scripture. But also know that it's not the things we don't know that hurt us. It's the things that we do know and do understand and don't practice that are a problem for us. So get a Bible, begin to read. How do you do that? Well, my most prevalent suggestion is to begin with the Gospel of Mark. Mark is 16 chapters. If you read a chapter a day for about 15 minutes or 10 minutes, well, in just a little over 2 weeks, you will have read through the entire life of Christ and have a good framework, a good outline of what happens to Christ in his ministry here on earth. Now, Mark is the shortest of our Gospels, but it serves as a really good introduction. And what Mark knows about Jesus, he learned as a member himself of the early church, but also from Peter. I don't know if you realize it or not, but Mark was the first streaker in the Bible, maybe other than Adam and Eve, but there's a story told about a young man who was listening to Jesus teach and preach, and he was in an area where people were trying to catch Jesus, or I think it was on Holy Week, and they grabbed his coat and he took off, and the insinuation is he took off without any clothing on. So that's Mark in the New Testament. But the Gospel's tremendous. I commend it to your consideration. The denomination, the United Methodist Church, has asked us to read a chapter of John each day, and I'm doing pretty good on that one. Austin, I don't know if you did that or not, but I'm reading right along with John, and John's Gospel is different. The Matthew, Mark, and Luke are what are called synoptic Gospels. They're measured in a different way. So the word synoptic actually means reed or measuring stick, and they're very similar. They have a lot of the same stories and same miracles, and they have the parables. The Gospel of John doesn't have parables, but it has certain stories that maybe the other Gospels don't have. My favorite Gospel is Luke, because Luke causes us to focus on Jesus' love for the poor and the person outside. As we think about all of these things, again, I would say to you, read the Gospel of Mark first, and then go to the Gospel of Luke. I just think the Gospel of Luke is absolutely some of the most beautiful literature ever written. John is a little different, so you might want to go Mark, Luke, Matthew, or Mark, Matthew, Luke, and then go to John. It's nothing wrong with it, it just is different. I also try to read a proverb a day. There are 31 proverbs, and if I read a proverb each day, most months I have 30 or 31 days, and I cover the entire book. Proverbs is wisdom literature, which is, to me, applied knowledge, and it reminds us that we have a way of living and being in the world which reflects the wisdom, the idea, and the understanding of God. I love the Old Testament. I am always fascinated with my friend, my neighbor, Rabbi Art Rutberg, who is the congregational leader, the rabbi at Temple Bat Yam. He tells the most wonderful stories about the Old Testament. The other day I was there in worship with them, and he was talking about Joseph and the coat of many colors, or the coat with sleeves, and how he wasn't always the good guy and how he suffered greatly in his life story. Those stories in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy are Torah, they're law, and they're important for us as Christians as well as they are for people of the Jewish faith. And then in the Old Testament you also have the prophets. And prophets are not necessarily people who predict the future, but there are people who are spokespeople who speak up for God in difficult and hard situations. And you have the Psalms, and you have the Proverbs, which is more wisdom literature. A lot of different types of literature. Read the Old Testament. Some places you'll look and think, wow, that seems really harsh. And in other places you'll find the beauty of it shining through. I try to read a proverb a day. Been doing that for a long time. And I try to read a psalm in the morning and a psalm at night. And it sounds like I'm doing a lot of reading from the Bible, and I am. I think that's important because I'm a clergy person, but also I think it's important for our faith. I have a friend in Charlotte, North Carolina, who, when he was working on his PhD in Old Testament studies, had a professor who said to him, if you really want to learn the Psalms, pray a psalm in the morning and pray a different psalm at night. And you do that by inserting your personal life, your personal pronoun in that sense. Whatever pronoun, whoever you are, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. It's very personal. And I commend to you the Psalter. I have to tell you that the Psalter, the Book of Psalms, is probably one of my very, very favorite books of the entire Bible. Read the book of Job. It's a hard book. Unmerited, undeserved suffering. But it's a tough book. But it's one that I think we see in our lives and our world every day. People have things that happen that just don't seem like they deserved it or doesn't seem fair. And I have a love-hate relationship, Austin, with the Apostle Paul. There are some things about Paul I really respect and admire. And there are some things about Paul I think are challenging. With Paul, keep in mind that every part of the Bible, including the Gospels and the Old Testament, just the act of reading alone is an act of interpretation. And so as we read through the Bible, you have to interpret Paul in the cultural context in which he's living. So when Paul says to women, be silent in the church, that's not an admonition forever. That's an admonition for that particular church at that particular time because of what was happening in the Corinthian church. Women are wonderful preachers, wonderful leaders, and they're fabulous, and they should have every right and privilege to speak. But here's the bottom line. You got to start somewhere. You got to read the Bible. I think the Bible informs our Christian living and informs our faith and life. So my encouragement is begin with Mark, try the Psalms, try Proverbs. And once you finish Mark, then go on to Luke or Matthew and keep going. And save Paul and maybe parts of the Old Testament for last. They're going to challenge you when you read them, and they're going to make you really think. Sometimes it's good to think like that because our faith needs to be a combination of vital piety and also of well thought. Vital piety being heart and mind combined. So try reading the Bible. And if you have questions, call me, write me, email me. I'm always accessible at Community Church. I am thrilled to help you when you're reading the Bible to understand better. Have a great day, and may God bless you.